at that flame roar. Look at it go. Here's a question. Could we call this boiling? I find fire a little scary. This is my show, gosh darn. What's up, friends? My name is Miranda, and this is another episode of Miranda in the Wild. And in this video, I will be testing out the 5 most common types of backpacking stoves. When I say different types of stoves, really what I'm referring to is the different type of fuel that the stoves use. The 5 types of fuel that we have and types of stoves are isobutane propane, or IsoPro stoves, white gas stoves, solid fuel tab stoves, alcohol stoves, denatured alcohol, not drinking alcohol, and wood burning stoves. Ta-da! Since I don't want to necessarily pit them against each other, I thought instead I would give them superlatives, like paper plate awards, but for backpacking stoves.
What's a paper plate award?
A paper plate award, like when you're a little kid and you win best car.
Or like
I give it to you.
Like superlatives, like high school yearbook.
Right, or yeah. High school yearbook superlatives. My sister got best car. We drove the same car and I didn't get best car. I was so mad. Camping stove superlatives. So I'm going to boil 2 cups of water, or about half a liter of water, with each of the stoves. This is not about which stove is the fastest, more about just like the user experience, because I'll just be boiling the same water over and over again. I have a lot of experience with isobutane propane stoves. I have never used a white gas stove. I've never used a solid fuel stove. I have some experience with alcohol stoves, but not a ton, and then I have used a wood burning stove a handful of times. After this video is done, you can make the best decision for yourself about which stove is right for you. Let's boil some water. So the first stove that I'm going to boil water with is an isobutane propane, or IsoPro stove. They're really convenient. There's tons of different options of IsoPro stoves, and overall they're just the most user-friendly, which is why I have one. Yay! At higher elevation, IsoPro fuel takes longer to boil water, which is not the same for some of the other stoves, like white gas stoves. These can be recycled in many areas, but not in all, and you have to make sure they're totally empty and puncture a hole in them. Cool, we're gonna boil water. So this is my stove. This is a Snow Peak Gigapower stove. You have the pot supports, which collapse in, which makes it small. And then mine has a piezo lighter on it, which is this little button right here. So press this, it sends a spark through this little dude, and that ignites the stove. So this stove, like many IsoPro stoves, is just gonna screw onto the top of this canister. And then we'll be cooking with gas. Ha! Hopefully this is obvious, but don't turn these stoves upside down when you're screwing on the thing, because it'll leak fuel out. Speaking from experience, don't do that. Half a liter of water into my kettle. I'm gonna open this. And we're gonna turn this all the way up to max. One other thing about IsoPro stoves while I'm waiting for this to boil is that generally they're gonna need wind screens if you're in windy conditions. Obviously it's not windy here because I'm inside, but in a well-ventilated room. That's actually pretty common for a lot of stoves, is needing some kind of wind screen. We are almost to boiling. A watched pot never boils. Very impatient. Yeah, and there we are. We have reached boiling. Water boiled, and then all I had to do was just turn this little gas release valve. Is there an official name for this? Gas release valve? A doohickey. I had to turn a little doohickey, and that turns this off. Another awesome thing about IsoPro stoves is they tend to pack down really small, like the stove itself. So if you can bring different fuel with you, or if you can have access to fuel, this can be one of the most compact systems that you'll find. My superlative for IsoPro stoves is most likely to be best for most people. That's a good superlative. Also most likely to be in my backpack. So next we have a solid fuel stove. This is the Esbit solid fuel stove. This stove closes up like a little box like that. And then you open this. These are your pot supports. And then this is where the fuel tab goes. The downside is that they take a while to boil water. They can be kind of smelly, and they're sort of a pain to clean up. As far as the plus sides go, I think it's really just that they're very lightweight and compact, so ultralight backpackers like them. They're also really inexpensive, and the fuel is really inexpensive. I wish I had more nice things to say about them, but I just don't know necessarily why you would choose something like this over a IsoPro stove. Awesome, let's boil some water. I'm just gonna open this guy up and drop this little tab into the center of the stove. Oh my gosh, straight up smells like raw fish. So you can see here in the middle of the stove, there's this little rectangle, and that's where the fuel tab sits. All right, let's give this a shot. I don't know how to know if you're going. You don't appear to do anything. It's going. Oh, I did it. Nice job, little friend. Look at that flame roar. Look at it go. That was actually really easy. It's also really pretty. It's like iridescent. A little nugget of fire and joy. Oh, do you smell it? Here comes the odor. It's been now on here for about a minute. We have some bubbles in there. It's burning, but we're definitely not to boiling. I mean, we got like a few little bubbles in there, which is nice. We're at 4 minutes. I mean, look, that convenience of just like putting that thing in there and lighting it was pretty cool. I guess if I had stuff to do besides like sit here and talk to you all, I wouldn't mind the wait time, but it is taking a while to boil such a small amount of water. Okay, here's the question. Could we call this boiling? I don't think so. I think this is probably boiling. 8 minutes to boil 2 cups of water. Am I saying that word right? Water. But look at that thing. Look how little is left. Magic. You can see that this was what I started with, and this is what is left. And that was just from boiling 2 cups of water. I can see why ultralighters would really like this, but overall it just doesn't seem super practical to me. And I guess that then what you do is just... All right, there we have it. So like nothing ever happened. Solid fuel stoves, cutest. Little baddie. So the next type of stove that I'm going to show you is an alcohol stove. You might be familiar with alcohol stoves being called beer can stoves or cat can stoves because people used to make them and still do make them out of old beer or soda cans or out of cat food or tuna cans. So the stove that I will be using is a store-bought Solo stove that I got obviously at REI. One of my favorite things about this stove is that you can actually store extra fuel inside the stove itself. And in there you can see that this is about halfway full of denatured alcohol. This is a pretty common thing to find in stores, whereas like white gas or even IsoPro can be harder to find in different parts of the country, let alone different parts of the world. One important thing about alcohol stoves is that this on its own isn't enough to boil water on. You actually have to have a pot support. So here I have my pot support. This guy is going to go onto the stove with the holes like this. Boom. And that will allow there to be enough ventilation for the flame to not be smothered, but then also I can rest the pot on here and that'll boil the water. What I want to do. I'm going to let this go for a little bit. Woo, there we go. So a little poof is getting in those holes there. And then pot support will go on. I'm going to put my pot on here, get my water boiling. So it has been about 15 minutes since I put this water on and it is warm. We have not yet reached boiling. I've been debating why people might want to use an alcohol stove when it takes this long to boil water. I'm assuming that either like my pot support and stove system is not the best. Overall, it seems like the type of thing where if you're like an ultralighter and you're already like willing to be sort of inconvenienced and just in general, that waiting for water to boil for like 20 minutes is not that big of a deal. I'm just kidding, ultralighters, I love you. When the pot is gone, obviously it gets a lot more oxygen. And so you can see that we like really have a roaring flame down there. So yeah, maybe if my pot support was like more holy, if I'd like gone with the whole mesh thing, this would work a little bit better. The superlative that I would give alcohol stoves would be best for ultralighters. Man, this is taking so long, I have to pee. This is the BioLite wood burning stove. This one is quite a few years old. I got this back when I lived in New York, but it was really great for backpacking there because there was a lot of kindling and there was like a low risk of forest fires. You can see in here is where I'll put my sticks and my twigs and stuff. And then this is actually a fan that goes onto the stove. And as I start burning wood, the fan will turn on, which will then in turn help keep the wood burning, and then it can charge stuff off of this battery. So it's kind of a cool system. So this is the fan here, and once the fire's going, turn it on to charge. And if I need to, I can plug something in at the USB port. And then this guy is the pot support, which is just gonna go right like that. What I wanna do is put some of my kindling into the bottom of the stove so that when I drop in my fire starter, that will ignite the flame. So now you can see I have my fire going. The little fan has started. Let's see how long it takes this to boil. Once this fire is burning hot enough to be like charging this fan, that is when you could then plug something in to charge it off of the fan, which is a really cool feature. And I think like that's one of the most awesome things about this. The natural kindling, I think, is like the main reason that people opt for using a wood burning stove. Just follow your fire regulations. As you can see, you get like little bits flying everywhere, so not safe for areas where there's a burn ban.
Only you.
Some of the downsides of a wood burning stove, obvious one is that if you're in an area where you can't use wood fuel, then this is just a no-go. If you're in a spot where it's really wet or damp, such as the Pacific Northwest, it can be really hard to use a stove like this. Some of the plus sides are, it is totally acceptable in most areas to gather tinder and kindling, these like small pieces of wood, as long as you're picking up stuff that's already on the ground and that's dead. Another downside of wood burning stove is it takes a while to boil water. It really is like best for like cooking or simmering on. I'm probably like doing this all wrong. I keep like obsessively checking it. This is how it always has been for me with wood burning stove. It's always like, is it? Oh, we're doing okay. All right. So I got my stove to a simmer. It didn't get to a total boil, but it's been like 10 minutes. That is one thing about wood burning stoves. It just takes a while, especially depending on what types of materials you have available to you. But again, it's a natural source of fuel. If you have access to kindling and if you're in a spot that's not super damp or where there's no risk of forest fires, it's a really cool system. Wood burning stoves, great for natural fuel. The next stove that I'm doing is the Whisperlight, which is a really popular white gas stove. Honestly, I find these stoves a little scary. I'm excited to give this a shot, but I'm also a little bit nervous. Once I fill this bottle with fuel, then I'm going to attach it to the stove. I'll let this little cup down here fill with fuel, light that, and that's called priming the stove. From every time I've seen people use these stoves, what happens is you get this like big like poof of fire. Poof of fire? Have our fuel bottle here, and this is my white gas fuel, and I'm gonna pour some into this bottle until it's like a third full. These bottles do come in different sizes, and you can fill them all the way up if you're going on a trip where you need a lot of fuel. Wow, look, it says respect fire on the pump. So this is my pump for my stove. This is gonna go into the bottle, and then there's this hole over here on the side of the pump, and that's where this little dude is gonna go. This is the best part. So I'm told I should pump this fuel bottle like a bunch of times. With a full bottle, you probably need less pumps. With less fuel in here, you'll need to pump it more. But that's just part of the priming process of the stove, so you'll have to do that every time before you light your stove. So this is gonna go in here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to turn this little fuel gauge about 3/4 of a turn, and that's going to allow fuel to drip down this tube into this little cup here. And I need like about a teaspoon of fuel in here. There we go. So I've got my fuel in my cup. I've closed this up. The next thing that I'm gonna do is light that fuel that's in the bottom cup there, and that's gonna make this like big flame come up, and it's gonna burn really big right away. What I want is for this tube here to actually heat up, and then that will allow for the vapors to come up into the top part of the stove. At that point, I'm gonna turn my stove on, like open up that fuel gauge, and what I should get are these like blue flames. And it is lit. Whew, that wasn't that bad. I did it. So now you can see that this flame is going to burn through that fuel that's in that cup at the bottom. We're heating up through the top here. We're heating up this little tube. And it's gonna get to be like a pretty big flame. Fire! It's a little scary. I find fire a little scary. Look, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Respect fire, y'all. All right, so we're burning through that fuel, we're burning through that fuel. That's what we want. I did it! Oh my gosh, I've never done this before, I did it! Yes! Okay, great, let's boil water. Where I'm filming is actually fairly chilly, and so in theory, this stove should boil water faster than my IsoPro stove, which is affected by cold, because white gas is not as impacted by cold temperatures. In theory, says the internet. I've never, as you can see, I was really excited to get this lit. And we are boiling. Yay! Look at that. Whew, man, my pits are so sweaty. That was really scary. The superlative that I would give the white gas stove is that white gas stoves are great for people who like things to be complicated. I should give it a better superlative than that. I'm sorry. I know people really like you. White gas stove gets best for thrill seekers because it's like, is it gonna work? And then like, is it gonna leak? Is it gonna light? And then you light it and then you get a flame and then the flame gets bigger and bigger and you're like, watching it burn, and then it burns down, and then you turn this, and then it's like whoop. So now that I've tested out the 5 most common types of backpacking stoves, I have to be honest, I'm probably still gonna stick with an isobutane propane stove. But I gave these all a shot, and the superlatives that I give them are Most likely to be best for most people, best for thrill seekers, cutest, best for ultralight backpackers, and best for people who like natural fuel. If you really love an alcohol stove or a solid fuel stove, tell me why. Let me know what about this is most appealing to you. And then if there's a stove that you think you'll probably never use, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on why you love your type of stove. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the wild. IsoPro stoves, most likely to be best for most people. And also most likely to be in my backpack.
Oh, Virginia came out there.
Did it? Did?
Yeah.
Did you hear a little Virginia? I am from Virginia. I'm not from around here.